So we are back with the second part of Microskills and Macroskills. And again, we're going to finish the rest of the exercises, only a couple more to go, and I'm going to give you the answers. So let's get started. The last exercise that we did was pausing to predict, right? And now we're going to look at actually the same audio, but I'm going to finish the audio, so you're going to be able to check your predictions, but we're actually going to answer these questions from the story. So we're going to listen to the story and answer the following questions. So it says, in your own words, describe the bully. In your own words, describe Peter. What does thunderstorm ready to explode mean in the story? What did Peter do? And what happened in the end? So here we go.
Peter and the Dragon. Although he was only 10, he was a giant. He used to take kids' lunch money just by looking at them with his monster eyes. No one in the playground was safe. As he patrolled for his next victim, he saw the new boy. Peter was also 10. Unlike the bully, Peter was a tiny four-eyed frog that didn't see much of anything. The bully thought he was going to have an easy meal, but what he didn't know was that he was going into a thunderstorm ready to explode. Peter was brave, but because of his size, he had been bullied before. So, during vacation, he had asked his dad to take him to a self-defense lesson. He knew fighting wasn't the answer, but he also knew he needed to be able to stand up for himself. That morning, in the playground, the bully's shadow covered Peter. He stared at the tiny little boy and said, "I'm going to pound on you, new guy. Then I'm taking your lunch money." The bully grabbed Peter by the neck of his shirt while everyone stared, silently, afraid for the little boy. Then, suddenly, Peter's fist flew like a bullet. It connected, and in one fell swoop, the monster had fallen. Everyone cheered. The reign of terror was finally over. The dragon was dead and no longer dared to bellow out smoke. In the end, Peter wasn't glad that he had to do what he did, but he was thankful that he was able to stand up for himself. The end.
If you think about it, none of the answers that we have here can be copy-paste, right? You really need to interpret a little bit to be able to answer these. So now you have to do is think of the list and which did we just practice right now. So go ahead and choose that one. In the meantime, you can pause or we can keep going. Only 2 more to go. I'm going to play 3 short audios, and then for each audio, you need to guess where the speakers are, who they could be, and their relationship with one another. So here we go. Audio number 1.
Hello, a single to Manchester, please.
Single to... That's £21.
And which platform is it?
Platform 3.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Audio number 2.
Hello, Miss Smith. I'm Tom Kelly. Thanks so much for coming in.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for meeting with me.
Of course. Did you have any trouble finding the office?
Nope, the directions on the website were great.
Good. So, to get started, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I studied at the University of Florida and graduated in...
Audio number 3.
Hello, sir. Are you dining alone?
Yes. Table for 1, please.
Smoking or non-smoking?
Non-smoking, please.
I have a table for you. Please follow me. Would you like a drink with your meal, sir?
Can I see the wine list, please?
So were you able to guess where the speakers were and who they were and the relationship that each one had? Who was one, who was the other? Yeah, it was pretty simple, right? So now choose from the list. What did we just practice here? And let's move on to number 9. Number 9 is the last one, and I'm actually not going to practice this one because it just asks you to retell the story. Try to use words or phrases from the story. Any of the stories that we've seen so far, I could ask you to retell it, right? So if I were to ask you about retelling the story, what micro or macro skill would I be asking you to practice? Choose one from the list. Now let's go on to the answers. Before we continue, make sure that you have all your answers with you so we can check what you've done. This will make much more sense if you've written down what micro skills were practiced, and if you went through the thought process of trying to analyze what those skills were. And again, these micro skills are basically just little steps that you take in order to be able to understand certain pieces of information. So here we go. The first one was actually micro skill number 12. You have your list, so you can read which one it was. The next one is micro skill number 8. Then in the listening to the story and answering the questions, we were doing micro skill number 7. In exercise number 4, we were doing macro skill number 11. Now, number 11 can sometimes be, and it depends on how you use it, it could be bottom up and top down. And we've talked about how there's a fine line at some points. I would say that this is bottom up, and I would move this macro skill into the micro skill because of the exercise that we just did. But there's other instances where you could use it a little bit more top down. So let's go to the next one. Number 5 is micro skill number 3. Number 6 is macro skill number 14. Number 7 is macro skill number 15. Number 8 is macro skill number 13. And the last one, which is the retelling, is basically a combination of the 13 and 14, and probably and possibly may have a little bit of 17. Okay, so the idea is not necessarily that you use one at a time, but you may use different. Like when cooking, you don't only chop. You chop, you season, you slice, you use the pan, you do all these little things at different points to be able to get a finished product. So when we're listening, we might do, depending on the listening recipe, we might do some things and not others. But we might, in another instance, we may use others, but not necessarily the same ones for every single instance. So it's really important for us to understand that micro skills and macro skills are basically just like little steps or little things that you learn to do to become a better listener. And when you're doing a listening lesson, you can use these within your lesson as top-down, bottom-up activities, because you want, in an intensive lesson, to practice the listening skill or the reading skill. Right now we're talking about listening, but to practice that listening skill and to be able to, just sharpen your skills. Like when you're starting to cook, you do a little bit more chopping to get better at chopping. That's the only way you can do it, right? And the idea is that in our intensive listening lessons, we practice these and we give students chance to work them out. But obviously in a lesson, we wouldn't do it like this video does it, which is just one activity and micro skill, one activity and micro skill. No, we would take a full lesson with pre, while, post, and then we would incorporate the use of a micro skill or a macro skill within the while, right? Maybe something in the post where you come back to what you've done. So it's a complete process. Right here, this video was just a showcase of how they work, right? But it's not a lesson. In a lesson, it would have to be more complex and it would have to be worked into what you're doing, okay? So hopefully this gives you a better understanding of what micro skills and macro skills are. We're also going to look at these when we get to reading, but in the meantime, just think about these and how to incorporate them into the lessons that you're doing, because these are great things to practice for students to become better listeners. Because, like I said before, in an intensive listening lesson, we're practicing not only students' language, but also their skills, and in this case, their listening skills. So if you have any further questions, feel free to send me a message. If not, I'll see you next class.